Last year, I got the job of looking after my buddy Dave's place. Dave was out of town for a couple of weeks, and he needed someone to make sure things at home were okay. He had some pets to take care of, a couple of little green critters and a few goldfish. There were also many plants all around the house that needed some water every day. I was more than happy to help. Plus, Dave's house was way cooler than my small place. The first 7 days were pretty smooth. It felt like I was having a mini vacation, staying in a place different from my own. The fish and the little green critters were easy to take care of. The plants, too, were happy with their daily dose of water. Everything was good until one evening, while munching on some chips at the kitchen table, I heard a man's cough, and it sounded like it was just outside the back door. I was startled. Who could it be? Quickly, I switched on the lights outside to let whoever it was know that someone was home. I counted to 30 in my head before peeking out of the window. The mysterious visitor had disappeared, but I was left wondering why he was there in the first place. My stomach rumbled, reminding me that I hadn't had dinner yet. As I walked outside to grab some grub, I saw something odd. There were footprints on the lawn. They started from the sidewalk, moved towards the back, and then returned to the sidewalk. It was as if someone was scoping out the place. A bit worried, I locked up and drove to the nearest burger joint. All through the drive, I kept trying to think of reasons why someone would just walk around the house and leave. No good answers came to mind. Back home, with a burger and fries in hand, I double-checked the yard for any more mysterious tracks. Finding none, I went inside, locked all the doors, and settled in for some TV time. An hour or so later, I was yawning and ready to call it a night. As I snuggled into bed with my phone, scrolling through my social media, I heard it again. Someone was walking outside, this time in the front yard. My heart raced as the sound got closer and closer. I could hear them near the front door, and then they seemed to move towards the back. Curiosity and fear mixed together as I tried to decide what to do next. Who was this person, and why were they so interested in Dave's house? I decided it was time to... That night, as I lay in bed, things suddenly turned scary. From my position, I could hear the sound of someone trying to mess with the back door. My heart started pounding hard, and I quickly stood up. Deciding that I should show whoever it was that someone was home, I went to the staircase and turned on the lights for the whole downstairs. As soon as the lights came on, the noises stopped. I went down a couple of steps to peek and check if someone was at the door, but there wasn't anyone there. Strangely, this made me even more scared. Before I could think much, there was a loud crash. I could hear the sound of glass breaking from somewhere downstairs. The noise scared me so much that I quickly went back upstairs and hid in the bedroom. From my hiding place, I could hear someone coughing, and then the sound of glass being crushed underfoot. This meant they were inside now. The next few minutes felt like a nightmare. The person inside was causing a lot of destruction. It sounded like they were knocking things over, smashing stuff, and making a huge mess. I quickly took out my phone and dialed the police. However, deep down, I was scared they might not reach in time. I could hear the stranger running up the stairs. They barged into a spare room, and I heard more smashing sounds. And then, they were outside my door. My hands were trembling as I realized I had locked it. Instead of leaving, the person began to bang hard on the door, trying to break it. A piece of the door even came loose. When he entered the room, I saw he had covered his face with a mask and wore a hood. He was carrying a heavy-looking metal bat. I was so scared that I was almost crying, but he didn't even look at me. He seemed mad, taking his anger out on the walls and furniture. He went around breaking stuff and then quickly left the room and finally the house. I stayed hiding, too scared to move until I heard the sound of sirens and the police arrived. The next day, Dave came back. It was heart-wrenching to see the state of his house. Even though the intruder had wrecked so much, nothing was stolen. The weird part was, the police thought it might be someone Dave knew, but he had no idea who would be so angry at him. I tried my best to describe the man to the police, but he had hidden his face and body so well that I couldn't give many details. What was truly scary was how he just went about breaking things, not even noticing me. To this very day, nobody knows who that man was or why he did what he did. All we know is he hasn't been back since that terrifying night. When I worked at a small grocery store in our town, I was in the back area where we kept all the extra stuff. It wasn't a big place, and it was owned by a family. There weren't many of us who worked there. The people who worked during the day would put stuff on the shelves, but at night, it was usually just me and another guy. We had to make sure everything was tidy in the back area and also put on the shelves anything that the day people missed. I liked the job because it paid better than the big stores in the city, but the hard part was that sometimes I had to work by myself. The other guy and I didn't like working alone because it was the same amount of stuff to do, but just one person doing it. So one Friday night, when it was my turn to work alone, I started my shift at 10:30 in the evening. I was moving boxes and putting stuff on the shelves. I was listening to some stories on my headphones to pass the time. After a few hours, when I was about to get more boxes from the back, I heard a loud noise. I quickly took off my headphones to listen better. Sometimes the building made weird sounds, but this was louder than usual. I walked to the front to see if everything was okay. The store looked normal, but I remembered something. At night, we locked the main doors where people come in, but the exit doors, which open automatically from the inside, could be opened from the outside too. You just needed to pull hard. I knew this because that's how other stores I worked at did it. Most people wouldn't know because you really have to pull hard to open it, but it always made me a bit worried. Still, since everything seemed okay, I decided to go back and continue my work, but I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. I was busy in one of the store's corners, placing drinks on the shelves, when suddenly I thought I saw someone walk by really quickly. It was just a quick flash on the side of my vision, but it was enough to make my heart race. I took off my headphones to listen better and quickly walked to the store's entrance to check, but when I looked, I couldn't find anyone. Feeling confused, I quickly walked around the store, peeking down each and every aisle, trying to find the person I thought I'd seen. It felt like a game of hide and seek, but I was the only one playing. With each empty aisle, I grew more and more uneasy. I even checked the storage area at the back, but still no one. Was I imagining things? Or was there really someone there? I tried to shake off the feeling and continued my work, but I kept glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. I heard a few more noises during my shift, and each time I would stop and look around, but I never saw anything. The next night, I talked to my work buddy about what happened. He's sort of in charge during the night, so he can go into the room where they keep the videos from the security cameras. We both sat down and started watching the video from that night. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. But then, around 80 minutes in, we saw a man come into the store. He wore a big coat and kept one hand hidden in his pocket as he walked around. The creepiest part was when he would stop and just stare at me from behind. I had no idea he was there, watching me. I felt a cold shiver down my spine just thinking about it. We saw the moment he knocked over something, making the loud noise I heard, and then quickly put it back and hid somewhere. We decided to show the video to the police, but because the man's face wasn't clear and he didn't really do anything, there wasn't much they could do. The image of that man watching me, with one hand hidden, kept playing in my mind. Was he holding a weapon? Was he thinking of hurting me? Or was he just waiting for me to notice him? I never saw that man again, but the memory of that night will always stay with me. I lived in a tiny house with my big brother Jack, not too far from a busy road. We both had normal jobs, and even though we're around the same age, being in our mid-20s, it was easier on our wallets to share the cost of living. Because of our jobs, we rarely saw each other. I worked when the sun was up, and Jack worked when it was dark. To be honest, it felt like we each had our own place. When he was at work, I felt like the whole house was mine, and I guess he felt the same way. Something really scary happened a while back, and even now, thinking about it makes my heart race. So on this particular day, I got back from work around 4 in the afternoon. I met up with a few buddies and hung out for a bit. By the time I returned home, it was about 10 at night. Jack had already gone to his job, leaving me alone in the house. I was tired and had to work the next day, so I didn't waste any time. I quickly made my lunch for the next day and rested on our old couch for a short while, watching a bit of TV. Soon after, I went to my room and fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, I suddenly woke up. I glanced at the clock, which showed 2:30 a.m. Rubbing my eyes, I was about to drift off again when I heard the sound of the front door opening. I thought it was strange for Jack to be back home so early, but then I remembered that he might be on his lunch break and had probably forgotten something. Without thinking much about it, I went back to sleep. The next morning, as I was getting ready, I looked for the lunch I had prepared, but it wasn't in the fridge. I thought, Jack must have taken it by mistake last night. So I just grabbed my things and headed to work. At lunchtime, since I didn't have my packed meal, I bought some food from a nearby place. By the time I returned home, Jack was gone, probably at his job. Wanting to avoid another lunch mix-up, I decided to clean the kitchen and leave a note telling him not to touch the food in the bottom drawer because it was what I prepared for lunch. With the chores done, I lay on the couch and ended up taking a short nap. When I woke up, the signs in the house suggested that Jack had come home for a bit and then left for work again. So I warmed up some leftover pasta from the day before and settled into my room to watch a movie. As the movie played, my eyelids became heavy, and soon I was asleep. However, for the second time that week, I found myself jolting awake in the dead of night. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I heard our front door open and shut. I assumed it was my brother Jack coming back. Feeling lazy, I grabbed my phone that was right next to my bed and quickly texted him, "Don't eat my food, okay?" Almost immediately, I got a reply, but it was just a question mark. I sighed, thinking Jack was just pretending not to understand. Not wanting to have a long chat over text, I decided to get up and talk to him face to face. I slipped out of bed and with half-closed eyes walked to the kitchen, but Jack wasn't there. I scratched my head and moved toward the living room. My heart almost stopped when instead of my brother, I saw a complete stranger sitting there. The man was dressed in old, torn clothes and looked really scary, like someone you'd see in a horror movie. He had a wild look in his eyes, and I noticed he had emptied our fridge. Food was scattered all around him on the table. He stood up so fast that it startled me. That's when I noticed he had something shiny in his hand. Panic took over, and without thinking, I dashed towards the front door. Luckily, he didn't chase after me. Standing outside, I tried to catch my breath and decided to call Jack. I quickly explained everything, my voice shaking. He sounded alarmed and told me, "Stay where you are and call the cops right now." While I was on the phone with him, I noticed the stranger stepping out to the doorway, glancing around wildly. Then with a loud bang, he shut the door, making it look like he was barricading himself inside our house. The police showed up in no time. I watched from a safe distance as they tried to talk to the man who now claimed our house was his. He was waving around a big knife and shouting at them. Eventually, they managed to arrest him. Seeing him being taken away, I could tell he wasn't in his right mind. Later, I found out he thought the house was only Jack's and had broken in while Jack was away at work, probably thinking he would surprise him later. We never found out how he got our house key, but we quickly changed all the locks. The most terrifying part was realizing that if I hadn't woken up when I did, things could have ended very differently for both Jack and me. The idea that this stranger had plans for that knife was too scary to think about.